We can't think about Easter morning without thinking about the events that have happened over the week, and indeed over the life of Jesus' ministry. He was a person who came and lived and told about a vision that we believe came from God, a vision of life abundant, a vision where people spent their time healing and sharing good news, a vision where people shared food with one another and the downcast were picked up, and there was equity for people. And then the authorities were threatened by this picture. And they were threatened that the people around Jesus might ask for equality, and that those who have a lot would be brought down in an effort to bring this equality. And so they saw him as a revolutionary. And they looked for a chance to silence him. And then the events of this past week, where we find out that not only is he a revolutionary thinker with a vision of a life that works for all people, we found out that he was a nonviolent leader. Because as the tension increased, as he was arrested, as he was brought to trial, as he was crucified, he continued to witness to a nonviolent way of life. He didn't fight back, and he didn't let others fight back on his behalf. He held true to the principles and the vision that had guided his life, and that he had tried to communicate, that this kingdom of God could be a reality on earth. That this nonviolence and people practicing nonviolence could be a reality. So here we are on Easter Day. And there's always considerable problems on Easter Sunday for us as we try to think, what was the resurrection like? What did it mean? Well, if you'll turn to the next picture and just stop there, the next slide. This is a familiar picture to us, isn't it? Of Jesus, the light shining on him. He looks up. It's like he's almost like a conquering hero. He's by himself. Do you notice that when he was living, he was very seldom by himself except when he went away to pray? So here he is, looking strong, looking blessed, looking alone. So just hold it there for a minute. If I say the name John Dominic Crossan, some of you will recognize it as a person who is a scholar, a biblical scholar, and his scholarship comes because he looks at the archaeology and what the times were in which Jesus was living. And he's just written a new book, and it's got a lot of pictures in it. That's the kind of book I like. It's called Resurrecting Easter. And he had this insight that he had never before seen. And the insight was that as they traveled in the Western community, as he traveled in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Syria and Turkey and Iraq, as he explored what was happening in the Eastern Orthodox churches, he became curious about a difference in their art. And in this difference, he discovered that in all the artwork that they had in Eastern or Western, you could identify and kind of understand the pictures of Jesus' birth. You could see and understand the artwork that went with his baptism, with his reaching out to children, with his being with sheep. You could see and recognize the commonality between the Eastern and Western art. But it was only when it came to the resurrection that he noticed there was no similarities in the artwork. Whereas in the Western world and the Western Christianity, we have often seen the single, strong, alone pictures of Jesus. Sometimes we see there's angels, almost like centurions, guarding him. In the Eastern Church, and if you'll just flip to the next slide there, in this slide, this is typical of the artwork in the Eastern Church. Now, don't despair, folks. I'm not just going to give you an art lecture. Okay? I think there's an important point that would be good for us to hear. The two people that he's reaching out to, that he's bringing along with him. Do you see the tomb breaking open? He's reaching out to Adam and to Eve. There's never a picture in the artwork of the Eastern Christian Church that has Jesus alone, but he is always reaching to bring into resurrection the first people, Adam and Eve. And there are others who join with him. And so Dominic Crossan said, I wonder what this difference means. And here's what he said. In this picture, we do not think of Jesus the individual being resurrected. The symbolism of this artwork says that the resurrection is for humanity, for all people, from the beginning of time. And so it is not the individual person who is resurrected. But perhaps Crossan says it is the vision that Jesus brought. That radical, non-violent vision of a world where the least were cared for, where the downhearted were brought into community, where those at the top cared for a distribution, where all could be included and have enough. So in the Eastern Church, the resurrection is not about a man. It is the resurrection of the vision for all of humanity. It is a recommendation that Jesus showed us a path. Now, I don't know about you, but if the resurrection is about us keeping alive and believing that this non-violent, inclusive picture of how we need to live on this earth, if that's what is to be resurrected, well, I can buy that. I can buy trying to work for and encourage and get behind a vision that would have us saying and living that nonviolence is the way, that inclusivity is the way, that not having solitary heroes, but having communities working together. Well, that's something that I would really endorse as a resurrection. In our world, we've got very good at violence. I don't have to go over the stories. You just have to listen to the news. Sometimes we just have to listen to our own selves. We speak about getting so furious that we could do violence. What would it be like if what is the vision of resurrection was that we would actively train ourselves to be peacemakers and to live in peace rather than with anger? If we would find ways without resorting to violence to deal with the issues of humanity, with an understanding that all were to be brought together, I could get behind that picture. And I believe that the church could. So John Dominic Crossan says, it may be, he wonders, if in fact we might want to start, as the world becomes smaller, we might want to start in our own Christian family to have conversation between the Eastern and the Western Church, and to explore and to be curious about the impact of such a different picture and a different take on the resurrection. Well, I thank you for listening, and I pray that that vision of wholeness, a vision of nonviolence, will grow in us and in our world. Thanks.